We want to welcome everyone to our ICJ weekly webinar today. Thank you for joining us here on Zoom and those who are joining us through live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. We've got a very good program for you today, talking about a very hot button issue, Israel and the coronavirus vaccine. And for those of us who live in Israel, it's been quite an interesting journey over the past year. Israel did very well at first in trying to keep the number of infected people down. Then we had a couple spikes. We've had 3 major shutdowns around the major Jewish holidays. And now the government has started a very ambitious rapid mass vaccination campaign that more than half the nation is now vaccinated, but it's with this new sort of RNA messenger vaccine developed by Pfizer and Moderna. And we want to answer some questions that I know a lot of Christians out there have about this vaccination program, the vaccine, why Israeli leaders decided to do this before it was fully tested as far as its short-term, long-term effects, and many other questions. Some of the things that we're sort of seeing out there get into some alarmist theories about how this was it was a real gamble. And so we want to turn to some Israelis we trust here, to give us their perspective on the vaccine, what the whole nation and they themselves, professionally, their families, those around them, the decisions they've gone through as far as getting the vaccine and all. And we're first very pleased, very honored to have Dr. Ze'ev Feldman, who is the Director of Pediatric Neosurgery at Safras Children's Hospital at the Sheba Medical Center down near Ramat Gan, Tel Aviv area. And he happens to be the president of ARAM, which is this association of state employed physicians in Israel, all the Israeli state doctors with the state health maintenance organizations. He's head of their professional association, also vice president of the Israel Medical Association. And we're quite pleased to have you, Dr. Feldman, to start out this discussion and help Christians answer this question. Why did Israel, agree to be really a massive test case for the Pfizer vaccine? And how is it going? Because it seems every day as we go along, this vaccine is proving itself. And Israel seems to be out ahead, but it was risky, and we need to hear from your perspective how Israel's doing in this. Please.
Thank you, David. Thank you for inviting me to share with you my thoughts about these issues. As you well know, and I'm sure the pandemic affected most of the world and changed the way we live, the way we practice, and had a huge impact on our daily life. Since March, actually, the end of February of last year, we encountered a virus which we didn't have a good medical response to. If we look backward, the practically the best measures against the virus is the mask, this social distancing, and avoiding large crowds. These are the best way to avoid being infected by the virus. If you didn't meet anyone, you didn't contracted it. But life is more complicated, and we had 3 waves of patients flowing into our hospitals and challenging our capacity. And each wave was more severe than the previous one. And it was very clear that unlike other places in the world with much more, let's say, discipline, Israel is not famous for our discipline and our following regulations. I'm looking astounded at Britain at this moment that in January they declared a very harsh lockdown when the disease was when they had over 60,000 daily patients going into hospitals, and as we will discuss, their immunization program is not as large and widespread as ours, but after 2 months, they reduced the daily number of new patients to 4,000 or 3,000, and they reduced the mortality rate immensely. So what can the British government can do, the Israeli government can try to do, but the Israeli people do not follow the rules as the British. So we had to have another solution, another option to avoid the ways of patients that really brought the hospital system to its capacity. We trained more people, we built new ICUs, and people and the healthcare workers worked around the clock, and it was very difficult. So when the news of the vaccines arrived, it was very, very encouraging for us, and I think for the rest of the world. I think starting last May and June last year, our health ministry administrators signed contracts with different companies, buying options actually for vaccines, because there was no product and nobody was sure that you are signing with a company that will succeed to develop the vaccine. And we paid for a lot of money for the options. And when Pfizer and Moderna declared that their experiments were successful, and when the FDA approved the emergency use of their vaccines, I think the Israeli government was very quick to sign the contracts with both companies, Moderna and Pfizer, and we were fortunate to get the vaccines very quickly. You asked me several questions in your mail, and you asked me if it was a gamble, and you asked me how can the government submit the Israeli population to a vaccine that you may know something about the short-term complications, but you know nothing at all about the long-term complications. And indeed, you have to weigh your risk in this condition. You don't have certainty. The only certainty is that about 2 to 3 out of every 1,000 people will be sick with severe complications, and the mortality rate from corona is a lot larger than the mortality rate of the flu or other common disease that we encounter on a regular basis. Even people who recover from corona have long-term effects. Some report fatigue, some report memory issues, cognitive issues. Some in the younger age group, we hear that several weeks after recovering from or becoming negative for the corona, they develop massive multi-organ failure due to not infection, but I missed the word, but that affects the heart, the kidneys, and really risk their lives. And the first reports from Pfizer experiment were that the side effects, the short-term side effects, were minor. Very few people had major complications like temporary facial nerve palsy that mostly recovered. A lot of people reported pain in the site of injection, and some reported fever and muscle aches, complications that are manageable and acceptable in the world of vaccination. So I think that the government offered this vaccination to the Israeli people, and there is no compulsory vaccination in Israel. I think that we did a lot of PR after studying the FDA or watching the FDA sessions, and after reading the scientific papers in the New England Journal of Medicine. And after we were sure that we can be certain with the facts that we have about the short-term effect of the vaccine, we recommended people to come and be vaccinated. The government did a stratified strategy, age-wise stratified strategy. They started with elderly and advanced to lower ages, because we saw that the mortality rate among the elderly at the initial phases was around 40%. So the government policy was to protect the elderly. Mm-hmm. And we are very happy to report that over 85% of people older than 50 in Israel are vaccinated to date. And I will show you in my slides the effect that had on the disease and mortality.
Okay, I can share those slides now. You want me to do that?
Please do.
Okay.
Next one, please. So you can see the rate of confirmed cases worldwide, and you can see that Israel is in the 9th place or the 4th place if you don't take into account countries with less than 2 million population. We have the 4th highest rate of infection with the COVID-19 in the world.
So some of that is due to a massive testing, more testing than elsewhere, isn't it?
Maybe.
It's confirmed cases.
It's confirmed cases, but yes, but we take the rate per 1 million. So it's not the total number, but the number per million population. And we are very, very high if you show the next one.
Yeah, this other one is deaths. You have a high rate of infection, but a low rate of deaths.
And
Your doctors have been doing a good job treating them.
On the right side, just to make make the point, we are number 54 in the world in mortality rate per million. So we want to think that this gap, we can take credit for the gap for giving the Israeli people excellent medical care. And we feel that we fulfilled our mission as a medical system, as a hospital system, and delivered excellent care for our patients.
Okay, and this slide
is this is the cumulative vaccination dose administered per 100 people in the world and in Israel. And you can see that we lead the world in the vaccination rate per population. The next one is the United Kingdom. We just crossed the 5 million population line of vaccinated people, and I'll have a slide at the end to show you that if you add the number of vaccinated population and the number of recovered patients which have the immune system activated against the virus, we reach around 89% of adult Israeli population who are protected against infection at this point. We can continue. And these few slides are very important because you see that you were right that maybe the total number of reported cases is a function of the number of tests you conduct, but the number of in-house inpatients is something more objective. And what this graph shows is that since January, and we started to vaccinate at the end of December. So at the beginning of January, if you follow the red bars, who are the number of patients above the age of 60, you can see that the ratio of patients over 60 was very high in January. And if you follow the graph to March, you can see that the ratio has come down very dramatically. And we think that this is the effect of the vaccination of the older population. We have more young patients now, but because in this group of our population, the ratio of vaccination versus non-vaccinated is lower, but the effect is very dramatic. And if you follow to the next slide, and these are patients in the very severe form who needs to be intubated and ventilated. And here again, you can see that at the beginning of January, and the wave is going up into February, you can see that the red bars is getting smaller and smaller as we progress, and that's again is the effect of the vaccine on the older population who were vaccinated initially. And if in January we had only 25% of intubated patient and ventilated patient who were young, now we have 45% of younger patients on ventilator. And that's the effect of the vaccine, the ratio of vaccination in that age population which is lower. And the next slide is more dramatic. That's the death rate and the mortality rate. You can see that starting about 5 to 8 weeks after all the population were vaccinated, the mortality rate in patients above the age of 60 is very, very, very low. Mm-hmm. So we are very confident that the government did the right thing to bring the vaccines, and we are very sure that the population did the right thing, that they went and got the vaccine.
Yeah. Okay, this is the daily mortality from corona down to 13.
Going down. We think now, as we reach higher rates of vaccination, even in the younger people above the age of 30, we can see that we have an overall effect on the mortality. We didn't see that effect, complete effect, with lockdowns only. We believe that the added value of the vaccine is very dramatic. And this is my final slide to share with you. These are the actual numbers. Up to this moment, 5,072,725 Israelis were vaccinated, at least with the first dose. 769,932 recovered from corona and have antibodies and are protected to some extent. So if you reduce the number of children in Israel from the 9.3 million of our total population, we have 2.8 million children, and to take only the population above the age of 16, 89% of our population above 16 is currently protected by the vaccine. And as we speak, Pfizer just analyzed the results from Israel, and their number is that their vaccine is protecting 97% protection from symptomatic disease and 94% from asymptomatic disease, which is better than the initial experiment that was published back in December.
And this means that the vaccine is protecting people. There's only 3% chance if you have the vaccine that you'll get it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't take into account any side effects. But you're saying the Israeli government had enough information at the start.
We didn't have enough information. We had the same information as the rest of the world and as the FDA had at the beginning. Mm-hmm. But we took a calculated risk, analyzing the risk from the disease versus the risk from the vaccine. And now there are over 62 million vaccinated people in the United States, over 22 million in Britain, 6 million in France, and 6 million in Germany. So you have very large numbers, and you don't hear of any major short-term complications except those that were mentioned initially by Pfizer. The long-term, nobody will know, but we don't have the time dealing with such a deadly disease to wait the 1 year, 2 years time that we'll be sure that there are no late effects of the vaccine. So definitely it's a calculated risk, and we took the risk, and I think the Israeli population is benefiting from it now. And I can tell you that from my point of view in the hospitals, the number of severe patients is going down. We closed several wards, corona wards. We closed several ICUs, and we are trying to get to normal care for other disease because they don't stop.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Look, we hope you can stay with us a little while. We'll get some more questions to you. We want to bring in our next guest, Calev Myers, but I just have one question for you. People who are going in to receive the vaccine, is there any screening as far as asking questions about possible vulnerabilities to side effects, like people with autoimmune disease, or are just Israelis going in and saying, here, shoot me?
No. People with allergies, we had special sessions with allergy specialists present when people with allergies were given the vaccine. People with severe disease and autoimmune disease, the physicians had to clear them for the vaccine, and not everybody was vaccinated due to those restrictions. So it was very completely a process that safety was one of the highlights of before our eyes.
Okay. All right. We want to thank you for being with us. Hope you can stay some more, have some more input here. We got before I introduce Calev, we got a good audience today. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube and you need translation, we have Chinese, Portuguese, and Spanish translation over on the webinar at on.icej.org/ICEJ webinar, capital ICEJ, capital W webinar. That's case sensitive. And then if you're, others who want to go over to Facebook or YouTube, you go to Facebook or YouTube and look for ICEJ there. Okay, we want to bring in Calev Myers. He's a good friend of the embassy. He even does legal work for us. He's an attorney with Yehuda Raveh Law Firm, one of the more prominent law firms in Israel. He also launched years ago the Jerusalem Institute of Justice, a public interest law firm. He's a member and I think former officer, International Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists, and also founder and chairman of Arise. It's a business matchmaking firm between Israeli and foreign businesses and investors. It's the Alliance to Reinforce Israel's Security and Economy. Good to see you, Calev.
Thank you, and it's great to be with you. David, a few minutes ago, I sent you a slide by email, which I wanted to ask you to, if you see that, if you could put that up.
Okay, you go ahead and I'll try and find it here.
Yeah, no problem. So there's a, Hebrew is an interesting language. I know a lot of people on the call are interested in the Hebrew language because you want to study the Bible, understand the Bible and its original source. There's a special root, and so the Hebrew language is built on root words, and there's a special root of chet samech nun, chasan. And from the root word of chasan, we have a few very interesting words. One of them is chasinut, and chasinut means immunity. And so it would refer both to medical immunity, but also to legal or political immunity. In many countries in the world, the state leaders have chasinut. They have immunity against criminal trials if they're acting as prime minister or president. Our prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, wish he had chasinut, but he doesn't. In our political system, you can be under an active criminal trial when you're president or when you're prime minister. And unfortunately, our prime minister is undergoing 3 criminal trials right now. And he would like to put together a strong enough coalition to change the system so that you would not be able to, so that he would have chasinut. You wouldn't be able to try an acting prime minister. But this is very connected to vaccination too, because the word vaccine in Hebrew or vaccination is chisunim. It's from the same root chasan. And so I do believe that one of the reasons that our prime minister is pushing the chisunim to get everybody vaccinated as quickly as possible is because we have upcoming elections, and he liked to do very well in that, so he could create some immunity for himself legally. That's probably part of his considerations. I don't want to be completely cynical because I do believe that he also wants to try to protect the health of the Israeli people. But I think there are definitely other considerations that have come to play in Israel. However, I believe.
Calev, I can't put up the slide because it may be that it's in Hebrew or something.
Okay, no problem, no problem. I just wanted to show those words, the root word chasan.
Okay.
As an Israeli citizen, I would say even if our prime minister had part of his considerations were connected to his own political interests, and he wanted to have a great success with the immunization, so he went and he was one of the earliest leaders to negotiate option deals with Pfizer and Moderna. And then he signed on a deal basically to make the public of Israel a testing laboratory for Pfizer to a certain extent by giving information regarding certain side effects and the successes and failures and percentages of the effectivity of the vaccination. And through that, he was able to be an early bird, to really catch a large number, pretty much enough to create herd vaccination for our whole public. He's also negotiating a deal. He's trying to negotiate a deal for Pfizer to open up a factory in Israel so that if different variants or mutations in the future would necessitate a follow-up vaccination, those would be able to be created locally and produced locally for quicker distribution. Until now, all of the vaccines have been imported, which creates certain issues because the Pfizer vaccine has to be at a very low temperature, and I don't want to go on that rabbit trail. But I would say that even if some political considerations affected the policy of running forward and vaccinating our public as quick as possible, I, as an Israeli citizen, am happy that happened, because I'm happy that our country is one of the more vaccinated countries in the world, and now things are starting to open up. I just want to share one other statistic. I think Dr. Feldman's slides were excellent and very interesting. There's one other statistic which is regarding the contagion ratio, or the ratio at which this is moving from person to person right now. And every other time that we had these lockdowns and then we opened up the market after the lockdown, the contagion ratio would go up. The contagion ratio is the amount of people that on average get sick from one person who is sick. And this is the first time that now we are opening up this last lockdown and the contagion ratio is going down instead of going up. And that's clearly because of the vaccination. Right now, the contagion ratio in Israel is 0.85, which means theoretically, if 100 people are sick, 85 people will get sick from them. But it's dropping every day now because of the vaccination, which I think is good. Just two more points. One, as a lawyer who not only do I represent the International Christian Embassy of Jerusalem, but also many churches and synagogues and houses of worship. I know many Christians around the world may be interested to know, what are going to be the limitations on houses of worship based on the current Israeli policy as far as accessibility to worship services. And so the rule today, and again, this is changing from week to week and from day to day with government decisions. I can tell you what the situation is today, which is within a house of worship, you have two options. According to the first option, if you do not use what we call the green passport, and so it's just a normal house of worship that you're not checking anybody at the door, you can either have 20 people praying together, worshiping together in a closed space, or 50 people in an open space, in an open air facility. That's if you're not implementing the policy of what we call the green passport. So 20 people in a closed space, 50 people in an open space. If you want to check people at the door and see that they've been vaccinated, which is the green passport policy, then you're able to have more people in your meeting. First of all, you need to, the government doesn't force you to do that as a house of worship. But actually, in order to do that, you have to register with your local municipality so that they know that you're a house of worship that's doing that. But once you're checking the green passports at the door, then you can have up to 50% of your occupancy. So if you have a room that seats 100 people, you can seat 50 people, etc. And there's a few more rules that it's up to one person per every 7 square meters. And in any case, no more than 500 people. So if you're in a big stadium and it's, a house of worship, by the way, it's the same rules right now for other cultural events, music concerts, and so on and so forth. It's up to 500 people. So this is the way that Israel is trying to balance the very, I would say, gentle situation between wanting to preserve freedom of worship and basic human rights and civil rights so that everybody can you go to their synagogue or their church or their mosque, but at the same time trying to protect people from the disease. I was also asked in an email from David, just my thought process as an Israeli citizen, should I get vaccinated, shouldn't I, should my family get vaccinated, etc. For me, I would say, I look at it as any medical treatment in my life. You always have your risks and your benefits. So, when you take aspirin or Tylenol, if you actually look at the potential side effects there are potential risks to anything you do. And so you have to say, okay, is the benefit from this worth it for the risk? And so there was a risk here that there isn't data regarding long-term effects of the vaccine, etc. To me, it seemed like that risk was small enough that the benefit was greater than the risk. The benefit being me not getting sick and perhaps bringing sickness to family members that have pre-existing medical conditions or are very old and are in a precarious situation. My father-in-law, who I love very much and lives right next door to us, and Aryeh Bar David, many people know him, he's pretty well-known Bible teacher. He's an impossible guy I mean, I guess he kept the lockdown rules as much as possible, but he didn't like them. So once in a while we would get surprise visits. But he has issues with diabetes, and so diabetics were hit the hardest of any pre-existing medical category. As far as what I've read, 25% of the people who died in the first months of the pandemic, the pre-existing medical condition, were diabetics. And so I God forbid wouldn't want to be the reason that my father-in-law would suffer as seriously. So for me, the benefits at a very personal level outweighed the potential risks. And I would also say that honestly, I was motivated by being part of helping our whole country come out of this. I wanted to play my part in getting herd vaccination as quickly as possible so that life can get back to normal as quickly as possible. So for me, I think it was a relatively easy decision. And as soon as my age category opened up, I went and did it. I found the process to be very professional. They did ask me if I had any allergic background. My wife, by the way, has had severe allergic reactions to certain medicines in the past. I think it's called prophylactic response, life-threatening response. And so she was treated differently. Like Dr. Feldman said, she had to go on a certain day when they had allergy specialists there. And after she got the vaccine, she had to wait for 30 minutes to make sure there was no negative response, whereas I only had to wait for 10 minutes. So Israel's going about it in a very professional way, I feel. And it's showing, I think it's showing a certain amount of success. Our prayer is that it'll last for as long as possible. Our prayer is that, we won't have these more variants or mutants that cause the vaccines to be less effective, you know, in the near future. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to be on this panel.
Calev, when you talk about the green passport, though, you're just talking about when you go in and get vaccinated, they'll send you something for your mobile phone and you just show that at the door. It's not like something put in your actual passport, like a yellow passport.
That's right. That's right. You can either download an app to your smartphone and then you have a certificate, a digital certificate with a barcode that can be scanned at the entrance to places that want to check at the door. They also send to your email, and it looks exactly like that. Thank you, Dr. Feldman. They also send you your email document that can be printed out and, you know, put in your wallet that can also be used. We have a big question as to the extent to which other countries will recognize this for Israelis who want to travel abroad. But right now it's just being implemented regarding the opening of public facilities in Israel.
Yeah, I want to go back with a question to you about, say, the political motivations of Prime Minister Netanyahu. It just seemed like nearly the whole senior leadership in Israel, at least those who would be his biggest political rivals, every one of them seemed to agree with this vaccination program, with the prime minister's response. There were certain disagreements. Bennett said we got to have the army more involved, things like this. But on the vaccination program, it seems like everyone is trying to out pro-vaccine the next guy. And there's really, if it was a mistake or blunder, no one is trying to take any advantage of that issue to try and bring down Netanyahu. So it seems there's a consensus among the political and the medical professions here, the political field and the medical profession, that this was the way to go, and so far it's working.
Yes, I would say that there is a broad political consensus regarding the vaccine, and the two biggest controversies in our political discourse in Israel are, number one, the ability of people to land in Israel from other countries, and even Israeli citizens to land recently. It's been very, very limited as they've been trying to bring down the numbers. And so the freedom of travel was a big issue. Many of the political opponents of our prime minister felt like the airports should have been completely shut down, or there should have been different testing to make it more efficient, because a lot of the sickness was coming in from people who were landing in Israel. And the other issue, which is similar, I know, to other countries, is that we have certain communities that have much lower vaccination percentages than other communities. In Israel, for some reason, it's the ultra-religious and the Arabic-speaking communities. I think there are two reasons for that, probably. Number one, I think there's probably a lower general trust of government policy in both of those crowds for reasons that are too complicated to go into. And secondly, I think that, it's not I think, it's objective a fact that they have high density areas. So when you go into the ultra-religious and some of the Arabic-speaking areas, you have sometimes 2 or 3 times as many people living in the same amount of square meters. And so the rates of sickness are just higher when you have a pandemic like this. And then when you add to that a little bit of a nervousness in those communities about getting vaccinated, it caused higher sickness in those areas. And so Prime Minister Netanyahu's political opponents were opposing him on his policy to do general lockdowns. A lot of people said you should have much more pinpointed lockdowns. So if you have neighborhoods and areas that have higher sickness for various reasons, you should only shut down those areas and not the general public. Those were the biggest political, I would say, controversies. But those are very difficult decisions because of the desire for equality and civil rights and human rights and wanting to treat everybody in the same way. So I would say that there's no magic formula for handling a pandemic like this. And I think our leadership has actually done a pretty good job, considering that it's always hard to navigate and you're never going to get it perfect. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Before we move on to our third guest here, Israel Pochtar, just very quickly, any medical decision should be made based on informed consent. Do you think the Israeli public is getting adequate information on short-term, even long-term risks before getting the injection, the vaccine?
I immigrated to Israel from the United States about 30 years ago, and I can say that the medical practice in America is much more thorough in informing people who are going to undergo medical, as a generality, and medical services, informing them of the different possibilities and options and what the side effects might be, and so on and so forth.
You see it in the TV commercials.
Yes, here we have a socialized medicine and it's less of a, let's say, service-oriented atmosphere in general. But I will say that this time under the pandemic, the Israeli government did some good things, which when they started rolling out the vaccination, they took over a few major radio programs, for instance, and for several hours a day had it open lines where the public could call in and ask leading doctors questions. If, I have an allergy, I'm pregnant, my wife is pregnant, should we get vaccinated? And so there was I think, and still is, a general desire to do more than usual to inform the public, at least within the Israeli culture and the Israeli context.
Okay, thank you. All right, we want to go to our friend Israel Pochtar down in Ashdod. He's the founding pastor of the congregation Beit Elah, that's House of Praise, and also head of Voice of Judah teaching ministry. Good to see you, Israel. Thanks for being patient with us.
Hi, shalom from the desert. Actually, I have time in the desert, and in the house I stayed, internet gone. So I needed to go to Israeli neighbors and ask, can I use your internet in your yard?
Okay.
To be on Zoom call. So hi from the house of neighbors, good neighbors, good Samaritans. Well, I want to address, I'm not a professional when it's come to medicine, even vaccination, of course not, but I want to address it from the kind of spiritual or maybe more even practical side of it in the congregations, the applications, the doubts, the discussions, all of that. And by the way, I found out it is different in some congregations. It's not the same situation in all congregations. When it's come to my congregation or congregation I lead, we have about 60-40. About 40% of people are for vaccination. They did already, especially older people, they did vaccines, and about 60% are not. Praise God, I'm happy to see there's no fight, no no hatred and no confrontations, but people are respecting each other decisions, and it's kind of in a good spirit. That gives me joy, because sometimes when I see different blocks and when people sharing their ideas, there is also fights and because of differences, but somehow we have peaceful situation with even different opinions. So as a congregation, of course, the COVID was a very difficult thing. We couldn't meet properly for a long time, lockdowns, and all the challenges. Now it's changing little by little, but actually I would say most of the people, they are waiting. They're just not in a hurry. And I know in the moment, like when pressure was strong and we had really severe pressure about vaccination, people kind of, many believers, in my opinion, like around me, they would say, just because of that, I don't want to hurry with the vaccine. I want to wait. I don't want anyone push me and put pressure on me. I want to see for myself. I want to take my time, and that's why we have 60-40. And those who are concerned for their health, they did it right away. The older generation, almost all of them did it. In my congregation, very few people were sick, but there were a few stories. No one were hospitalized. Praise God, it was pretty good situation, pretty good conditions of people. But so 60-40, that's the situation now, and I think the moment when people will see more benefits of the vaccine, not the control, not the pressure, but just conversations or even benefits. Like one of the things that I think what will change situation with my friends, it's actually flights. I think in the moment everyone could fly after vaccine, more people will go and do that. And like Calev Myers said, they will probably measure the risks and the benefits, and probably that will be another critical point of change. Because right now people say, hey, that doesn't make big difference. We've been fine through all this season. We haven't had sick, and that's why many waiting, just waiting and looking for more benefits. And I think it's coming. It looks like a general situation in Israel is coming. So I'm sure we're going to have more and more people vaccinated. Some people are standing on stronger principles. They have their own reasons. I don't want to go to that, but as a congregation, we decided not to do divisions or we won't make decisions as leadership. Who can worship with us, who cannot. So we cannot go for green passport. No, we tried. We spoke to the government. We said, hey, can we do both, like one service for vaccinated people or those who have been sick and recovered, and for not? They said no. The one organization can pick only one way. So you are going with green passport and then getting in only those who've been vaccinated, or you receive a general population of people, and the limits are 20, 30, or 50 outdoor, or 20 indoor and plus 30 outdoor. That's what we do as congregation. We do 2 services. Now we have a congregation of 350 people with kids. So it's still big challenge. We can have over weekend only 100 people, but we're waiting for changes. So that's the situation in our congregation with most of my friends and other leaders in the land. I know there's probably first congregations who have decided to let only people who had vaccination or been recovered from COVID come in, and the others, they just wait. So lots of issues in the air, lots of conversations. But once again, I want to say there is a number of people who probably won't get vaccinated in the near future. Others will go when benefits will be bigger, and when they measure the risk and benefits, the benefits will be more impressive or more attractive. So that's the situation in the congregation in general, more or less.
Let me ask you this. I know for myself and my family, we've been sort of waiting ourselves for perhaps a more traditional vaccine that Israel was working on. I think the AstraZeneca and out of Oxford, and whether that gets here in time for us or whatever. It's this new RNA messenger vaccine, which is an artificial way of triggering your immune system. Are some of your people waiting for the traditional vaccines?
Yes, most of the people, they're waiting for traditional vaccines, that's for sure.
So they're not anti-vaccination, they just would rather have a longer period of testing for this new method.
That's right. And some just waiting. Some really, many people just say, I want to wait for maybe next fall to see the effect, just a little bit longer time of waiting, sort of different opinions. But basically, yes, when it will come to kind of traditional vaccine, I think probably 99% of people I know will go vaccinated. I have 6 medical doctors in my congregation. We have a big hospital in my city, and that's attract doctors. And I have about 6 Israeli doctors in my congregation. And actually, 4 of them get vaccine, and 2 still avoid to have it. There is very strong social pressure, professional pressure, but the 2 say, I want to wait, I want to see. But also I want to mention we don't often hear it, but there is movements and there is medical doctors in Israel who are opposing current situation and current ways of vaccination, and they actually even have demonstrations. I don't see them on TV or major media. I don't see, but one of my doctors from my congregation that are close friends with this person who going with other doctors to be out in Tel Aviv once a week. So there is voices. It's not mainstream, of course. It's a minority, but there is voices who are saying, "Hey, don't hurry, wait." And surely all of us have heard radical voices, and don't want to even go there. Of course, in every issue you will find radical people, but I think I'm focusing on reasonable people, who have their opinion, who are just keeping their side and talking about what they have without pressure, without fighting, but just in good spirit. So we do have different voices, and I think it's also important to share with the world. The mainstream, yes, obviously, Dr. Feldman and Calev share what's going on in Israel. I agree 100% with this description and graphs and all of it. But yes, there's other voices as well. They are minority. And then many just waiting. And once again, but I really see when flights will come up and when more openness will come up, we will see more people who are going to vaccinate it. And I don't know if just traditional vaccine will come, then probably all people I know will go to vaccinate it. So that's what I see in my area of influence.
And I think a lot of Christians out there are sort of hearing reports that Israel is compelling everyone to get the vaccine, which it's not compulsory from the government. There is a little pressure. There's, societal pressure. I go to the dentist, I go to here or there, and the first thing, it's kind of like the way you used to talk about the weather, nice weather. The first thing they'll ask you is, have you got the vaccine? And you sort of tell them you're waiting and whatever, but it's a little pressure, but it's not compulsion. Is this true?
And that's true. I mean, there were some stories, but actually Israeli government and even media addressed it very well. Some people, even those who are did vaccination, they for vaccination, but they've been not very clearly saying on TV, explaining what the mayor of Ramle said or what the mayor in another city said. It's not right. I want to know. I mean, we advise you to go and be vaccinated, but that's the legal line. And so they did pretty good job of explanation and slowing down extreme pressure. And right now, actually, what I see, there's some young people getting vaccines more and more because Israeli throwing parties. I mean, in my city, downtown Ashdod, we have parties, and everyone who going to get vaccine, they're going to have pizzas and even alcohol drinks. They're really two celebrations. So I see more and more people. But in my opinion, I said, actually, I like it more than just pressure. Like you have to or. And by the way, there is some fields. I have like tour guides who study in university. I mean, going to be tour guides, and some other guys who study in the university. They couldn't continue with their course if they wouldn't do vaccine. So they've been kind of forced. I mean, they still have choice, but they didn't want to lose and quit, so they went and vaccinated with because of the benefits, So
it is going to limit your choices some, but you still have the choice not to get it. You're not forced to get it. We're having to say farewell to Calev Myers. He has something coming up right at 5 o'clock. So we thank you again, Calev, for joining us. Dr. Feldman, are you able to take a question or two? Are you still with us?
I'm still here. A question or two. I'll be able to stick around.
Okay. The whole question of the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. How long have these RNA messenger vaccines and this research in it? I understand it's been going on for about 25 years. So there is some already medical data on these types of ways of artificially manipulating your immune system to trigger it to defend against diseases, correct? It's been done in other certain diseases and all?
It's been done in other diseases, mostly I think in cancer, trying to harvest after studying the mechanism of DNA and RNA and messenger RNA. It was harvested to try to introduce drugs in a more efficient way and targeted way to disease cell. And the actual this type of vaccine is actually more safe than others, because in other regular vaccines like the flu vaccine, sometimes you have the virus, which is a dead virus or reduced intensity virus, and all sorts of adjuvants that are added to the vaccines, and in this case it's not, and the actual material that is injected to you disappears within a day or two from the body. What is actually happening, it starts the process of your own immune system to be activated, and you take care of yourself once you are exposed to the type of spike proteins that are introduced with the injection.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking through some of the questions that have been posed here by our audience, and one of the common questions, are you satisfied that based on the data right now, that either the death rate or serious complications from these the Pfizer, Moderna vaccines that Israelis are taking, the mortality rate is much lower than the mortality rate for COVID, of getting infected and dying from COVID?
Listen, I think we can say clearly that the immediate risks are known. I mean, the Ministry of Health is accumulating all the reports of side effects on the vaccine, which are mostly minor. As I mentioned before, headaches, muscle aches, fever, very few cases, 1 in a million of neurological deficits. And I think that in most vaccines, the discussion is not mortality rate from the flu vaccine in 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. The discussion is whether you will develop some kind of autoimmune disease in the future. And we cannot answer at this point, but a lot of the autoimmune disease that develops after vaccination are due to not the active material in the vaccine, but the adjuvants and all the materials that are added to the active vaccine, and here you don't have them. So the risk is lower. There's no doubt that we are dealing with risk management and calculated risk. And if you have, as I mentioned in my talk, a death of a risk of mortality of 2 to 3 to 1,000, as opposed to a risk of late complication of 1 to a million, I think everyone has the autonomy to decide which way he would like to go. And I think 89% of the adult Israeli population have shown that they are making this decision towards taking avoiding the mortality, the immediate mortality, and the immediate morbidity from the coronavirus, and take their trust to the vaccine, which is up till now proves its effectiveness and its safety.
Okay. There are also different reports and rumors out there, and people are asking about it, that these RNA messengers, this vaccine, that it can alter your DNA, and is that the case? Altered in the sense that you pass on an alteration to your children?
This messenger RNA does not enter the cell, does not have any interactions with your DNA. I think it's is something that doesn't happen, and it interacts with your muscle cells. It activates them to start the production of antibodies to the protein on the surface of the virus, and that's what it does.
For my limited knowledge, I think biomedical science is sort of heading in that direction where they will be able to alter human DNA, gene editing, and things like this. Some of this is already here, but this RNA messenger is not doing that.
This messenger RNA does not do it. It's not the case. In some genetic diseases, you want to change the DNA and to cure people.
Yes.
You have, but this is not the case, and we should not we should not mix the facts with dealing with rare genetic diseases and the capabilities that we have, and dealing with this cure for a pandemic, which beside the benefits to our health and avoiding disease, it may bring our society to normal function. This is the added value of herd immunity, and I hope we are heading there.
And these RNA messengers from this vaccine, it goes in and it triggers and it's an artificial messenger, but it triggers something in your immune system to produce the spike proteins, that you can do it through a more natural traditional vaccine. But does that messenger then just dissipate, or is it staying in your body?
It doesn't stay in the body for more than a day or two.
But it trains your immune system that to produce a certain protein that if you then got COVID-19, it would automatically know how to respond. That's what it does.
It imitates the spike protein that is on the surface of the virus. And once the body is producing this spike protein, which is a very small number of the proteins that are on the virus, the immune system is engaged and starts to produce the antibodies against it.
Okay, I want to thank you for your time. I'll go back to Israel Pochtar for another question.
I will leave you. Thank you for
Dr. Feldman. Toda rabah rabah. Thank you very much. Israel Pochtar. Yeah, this brings up, the point that, we humans, we have immune systems, and it's a good occasion, at times like these, we really have to thank God that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that he built in an immune system. And so much of medical profession, even Jesus said, go to the doctor, go to the doctor. Doctors are trying to work with that built-in self-defense mechanism in our bodies. We have self-healing properties, and so much of medicine is trying to work with this. And so it looks like, these RNA messengers, it's a new way of doing it. Seems like an artificial way, but in the end, it looks like it's doing something that to help what God put in us react to these diseases. And, that is something we have to thank God for the way he made us to fend off these things. It's amazing. I want to ask you, we also are seeing conspiracy theories that there's something sinister or apocalyptic almost, and that Israel is really out ahead of the rest of the world, but it's like accelerated us into the prophetic and end times and whatever. And do you sense anything about this yourself, your own discernment in the Lord? Or is this just a pandemic that you got to make medical decisions, risk calculations in your own family? Nothing sinister here?
Surely we know, we understand, and I speak about most of the leaders in Israel I'm talking with. that it is not only a pandemic, but it's another step in the history of humanity, sorry, in the next step in our history, and next step forward systems that we can read in the book of Revelation, system of full control, that's for sure. And once again, it's not the vaccine, it's not the this pandemic, but generally what this pandemic brought, besides of fear and political influence, you know, because in many countries, as well as in Israel, as Calev well explained, it's also become political in addition to all the other challenges. But surely it's changing our world, changing our reality. And when we speak about control of governments and not godly control, we see as systems are building up. It's so we're not there yet, but surely it's going there. It's going these directions, and we can see with every now and then we see some major events, and those events because they're taking place and they cause governments and people to make decisions, reasonable decisions for good reasons, because you know, no one did it to control people, and surely there are probably some you know, people behind some stories, and there's probably some conspiracies that are real, but once again, we cannot you know, hunt every crazy group of people. But in generally, yes, we do see where world is going, and the systems are changing and adjusting, and I couldn't imagine that so soon our country will change, that they could hold in the houses all nations, you know. But it's not only in Israel; it's in the most of the modern countries. And by the way, the control is more strict. And whatever ways governments applied it in the modern countries than in third world countries. That's also interesting. But yes, we see certainly when we speak about Antichrist, last days, what changes that going to happen in society, the system is going there. And it's scary in one way, making Bible even more real on another way. But I also speak to my friends and my people. Remember, Yeshua said, when you're going to see all these signs, raise your head and rejoice, because redemption is coming. So yes, no one wants to have trials and tribulations. No one wants to have this, you know, difficult times. But eventually, it's leading us to the final day of the Lord, and that's a glorious day. So it's good and bad news. But also, by the way, I want to share, you know, when I talk to people who did vaccines and now others confronting them or just sharing their concerns, and there are some voices say that probably damage will be long-term damage and such. For those who did vaccination, I telling them, hey guys, we're going to pray with you, and we're going to believe in supernatural protection, even though, you know, whatever, right or wrong. So don't go to fear zone. You know, don't be afraid. Whatever you did, just be confident. God is going to be with you and will help you. And by the way, I surprised myself. You know, just recently I was driving home, praying, thinking, and I've just started to think. When speaking about vaccine, I didn't do vaccine. I didn't do that. I wasn't sick with COVID. I was in contact many times. I did many quarantines, and I did some family and neighbors, even tempted the Lord a little bit. That's my confession. Then I stopped going to the corona sick people. I haven't had, but when I say what I learned about myself, actually, week back to that moment, I could say I never asked personally the Lord, shall I take vaccine or not? So now I did it, and I'm waiting for answer.
Okay.
So it's advice to everyone. Beside of all the information, also speak with the Lord. The Lord has His ways and His wisdom, and He will speak to us. And sometimes seems like message will be different. Some will say God spoke to me good, and others will say God spoke to me not. Well, we have to keep peace and love each other and respect each other and others' decisions.
Yeah. Look, we could go on for a long time, lots more questions coming in, but I do think, you know, this risk calculation, the pros and the benefits and the risks, that one way of putting it is that a lot of people have really lived in fear of the coronavirus, and they're looking for a vaccine, they're looking to science to solve this. But I'd have to say there are a lot of Christians who are living in fear of vaccines, and we should not be afraid of either. We should fear God alone, who made our bodies, gave us these self-healing properties, and as you say, ask the Lord, what should I do, and not judge anyone one way or the other. And if Israel, made a mistake here or whatever, it's a little too late to go saying you did this. It's like you're saying you're praying for those who got the vaccine that there'd be no long-term side effects, and that's what we want to encourage Christians to do now. Israel took a great risk, and let's keep them in prayer that this pays off. And every day that the Israelis are going along, the numbers are going down. There's not many, we're not seeing a lot of side effects. It looks like it's paying off every day that you go by. It's proving itself to where you might feel more and more comfortable with getting this, or still waiting for a traditional vaccine. Or you have the right, if you don't want a vaccine at all, no one can force you to do it. And it's not really happening in Israel. There's societal pressure, but you're not forced. And so we just want to pray for you, Israel Pochtar, for your congregation, your family, for all Israelis right now, that the Lord would watch over this nation. He watches this nation, and he neither slumbers nor sleeps. And Israel, got out ahead of the rest of the world on this, took a calculated decision to go ahead and go with this. And Lord, we pray that it does pay off, whether we think it's a mistake or not. We hold this people up to you now. And if they're showing that this is safe and all, let the world understand that and see that and come to appreciate it. And this, God does seem to have given this people unique abilities. The Jewish people, they're so involved in science and medicine and advances, and we have to thank the Lord for that. And if this pays off, let them, deserve the respect, have the respect they deserve, and don't let other nations be jealous of Israel. All this anti-Semitism, we come against it in the name of Jesus. Where people are calling this the Jew flu and blaming the Jews for it or for exploiting it in any way. Israel faced the same decisions as everyone else. And Lord, we just entrust them to your hands in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. We want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you, Israel Pochtar. We thank again Calev Myers and Dr. Ze'ev Feldman. And we want to invite you to join us again next Thursday, 4 o'clock, this same time slot for next week's ICEJ weekly webinar. And I think we're going to be discussing the upcoming Israeli elections. And that reminds me, we're going to bring in Gil Hoffman, probably the chief political correspondent for the Jerusalem Post. He's always informative and entertaining, talk about Israeli politics, and we'll have some other guests talking about the upcoming elections in Israel. A current affairs webinar next week here on the ICJ webinar. Thank you and God bless you.
Shalom.